Are you staying true to your urge within? What I've found with leaders is that the only way we can get through turbulent times is to know what makes us go, what motivates us. And each of us came to this room because we were motivated by something that existed within us before we ever entered this room. An urge to do good, an urge to make a difference, an urge to be part of something larger than ourselves. And yet in our society, in our long laundry list of activities, we often lose sight of that urge. It gets disconnected, discarded, denigrated. And what I'm here to say today is that urge is our most precious gift. It's what enables you to keep going in hard times. Turning outward reminds me of an experience I had in Flint, Michigan 15 years ago. We had worked in the community for a number of years, engaging people in conversations about their aspirations and their lives. And we invited everyone who had been part of these conversations to the old Ramada Hotel, which was in downtown Flint on Saginaw Street. It was snowing that night. We thought no one would show up. And one by one, the people of Flint filed through that hotel door into that ballroom to talk about their community. And I asked them, what do you think, now that you've heard some of the things that you've said, what do you think ought to happen in your community? And the first person stood up and said, well, I think the Community Foundation needs to do something. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see this gentleman on my right. You know, when you're in a meeting, it looks like someone wants to say something. I could see him out of the corner of my eye, and there he was on the right-hand side, but then he shook me off. You've all experienced that, I'm sure. So another person stood up and said, well, you know, the Chamber of Commerce needs to do something. And at the very same time, I saw this guy lean forward again in his chair, but he shook me off again. And so another person stood up and said, well, the United Way needs to do something. And then I saw the guy, and he leaned forward even more. I came to know that his name was Mr. Brooks, and this time he was ready to speak. Mr. Brooks was an older gentleman. And like a lot of us who are getting older, you know what I'm talking about. He took both his hands and grabbed the side of the table and pulled himself up. And there he stood. He was a short guy. And there he stood, and he looked out over the crowd and his fellow neighbors and folks from Flint. And he uttered 3 words that day that I will never forget. He said, what about us? What about us? What about us in this room? What are we going to do? What about us?